The movie opens with a scene where King Haakon VII is visiting his grandchildren. His son, Prince Olav, informs him about a German ship that was torpedoed near Lillesand, revealing that German soldiers are already on Norwegian soil. They discuss the inaction of Prime Minister Nygaardsvold and Foreign Minister Koht, who have not mobilized the Norwegian army nor negotiated with the Germans or the English. Prince Olav expresses his frustration with the government's paralysis and suggests that they should be more assertive, but the king questions how far they should go and what their role should be in this situation. As they were discussing this outside, Princess Martha, the wife of Prince Olav, showed up and told Olav that Nico is on the phone. She greeted King Haakon, and he asked her of her opinion about the situation, and she told him that Norway should not end up on the wrong side of the war. At the German embassy and residence in Oslo, Kurt Brouwer is trying to make his daughter sleep. The news is being relayed, announcing that British and French warships have deployed minefields in Norwegian territorial waters. Kurt Brouwer is asked, his wife Annalisa, about the news broadcast. Annalise informs him that the British and French have mined the Norwegian coast to prevent the shipping of ores. Colonel Eriksson receives reports from Captain Sodom of foreign ships passing Færder, with Rauøy and Boløyern engaged in battle. With limited troops available for gun number 1, he instructs his forces to divide between both guns and call in all non-combatants to start exercises immediately. King Haakon VII is informed by an officer that Minister Koht has called with urgent news foreign warships are approaching the outer Oslo fjord. The officer suggests that they go to the basement for safety, but the king refuses. Quisling approaches Kurt and greets him with the Heil Hitler salute. He instructs Brouwer to present the Norwegian government with a memorandum of voluntary cooperation for them to sign. The official acknowledges that the Norwegians may view this as an act of aggression, but it is Brouwer's responsibility to convince them otherwise. Norwegian soldiers are preparing for a war. Colonel Eriksson is informed that guns 1 and 2 are ready for battle, and there are reports from Filtvet of blacked-out warships passing by, believed to be German ships. In return, they expect no resistance from Norway. Minister Koht told him that such a decision requires discussion with the cabinet. Brouwer, however, insists that there isn't time to wait, but he told him the cabinet is next door. Colonel Eriksson saw ships approaching from a distance, and he ordered his soldiers to fire at the incoming warships. Colonel Eriksson is faced with a decision as German warships approach. Eriksson orders the range to be set at 200 meters. As the ships close in, he commands his men to fire both guns at the approaching warships. They both hit the ship, and the other side also opens fire. Koht returns with a response to Kurt. Koht firmly states that Norway is an independent nation and cannot remain so if they yield to the German demands. Their answer to the ultimatum is a resolute no. King Haakon got a call from Prime Minister Johan. He told the king that Norway had been invaded and an attack on Oslo was repelled. The king is advised to leave the city immediately, with arrangements made for a special train to depart the next morning. The next morning, King Haakon and all his family are preparing to leave. He got in a car and left the house. On the train, King Haakon greets Peter. Peter informs the royal family that German warships have been reported at all major ports across Norway. Olav asks about diplomatic contact and negotiations, but Princess Martha suggests leaving negotiations to Foreign Minister Koht and the cabinet. As they were discussing this, the train shook and they were told to stay away from the window and to be on the floor because planes were around. Then they were told to get off the train immediately. They ran to the underpass and hid. The planes passed. Kurt told his secretary that he needs to talk to Koht about further negotiations. She came back to tell him that Koht and the entire cabinet is moved. The royal family is back on the train. They reached Hamar and got off the train. King Haakon is greeted by Prime Minister Nygaardsvold and Speaker Hambro. The Prime Minister updates the king on the situation. Germans control major cities like Stavanger, Bergen, and Trondheim, and the foreign ministry has been evacuated. He mentions that Oscarsborg fortress sank a large warship approaching Oslo, which has temporarily saved them, but the fortress is now under air attack, and Oslo is considered lost. The king is then given the news that his brother, King Christian of Denmark, had to surrender Denmark to the Germans early that morning, with little choice in the matter. Prince Olav is discussing with his father, King Haakon, his frustration with the Norwegian government's lack of preparedness and the failure to mobilize the armed forces. Olav suggests that the royal family should take a more active role in negotiations and consider directly communicating with military leaders. However, King Haakon expresses concerns about causing disunity and undermining the cabinet. A German official reports to Kurt that they have occupied Oslo and control all major roads with less than 50 men. He told him that the Norwegian cabinet has escaped. Kurt insists on negotiating, and believes he can contact the government before more lives are lost. He is informed that General Falkenhorst will arrive the next day, and by then, Norway must be under German control, from the king to every peasant. The cabinet is having a meeting. Prime Minister Nygaardsvold announces his resignation and that of his government to King Haakon and Speaker Hambro. However, Hambro decides not to accept the resignation, a decision supported by the king, emphasizing the need for leadership during this critical time. They talked about Kurt's proposal for negotiation. Despite the situation worsening, with German forces controlling major cities, there's a majority in parliament that wants to resume negotiations. Kurt states that although Norway has lost control over large parts of the country, it still has its freedom, government, and public support. The government is willing to continue negotiations if there is a ceasefire and will consider a solution similar to Denmark's to save lives. The king supports the cabinet's decision to negotiate. As they were going down the stairs, Prince Olav criticizes the government's lack of action and preparedness for war, while the king urges unity and support for the cabinet. Olav accuses his father of being afraid to take a stance, but the king insists on the importance of careful decision-making. Kurt saw an air attaché Spiller getting ready to leave, and he asked where it was going, and he is told that it is going to Hamar. As they were discussing this, a police chief came and told Kurt that Norway agreed to negotiate if the seas attack. Kurt went back to the official to tell him they have to stop the attack. He told him that they took orders and left, and Kurt ran after them to stop them, but they were gone. He told the chief that he couldn't stop the soldiers, but he wants to negotiate. The royal family is having a breakfast, and they heard on the news about the cabinet being responsible and that they put the country at risk. While they were listening to this, they were informed that the German force is coming and they escaped. Norwegian soldiers are briefed about their mission to protect the king and government from pursuing German paratroopers. They are assigned to defend a strategic line and prepare for battle by setting up machine gun emplacements and digging positions. The urgency of the situation is clear as they gear up to face the imminent threat. Kurt speaks with the German foreign minister and later with Adolf Hitler himself. Kurt believes the Norwegian government will soon agree to German demands, but he notes that they will not accept Vidkun Quisling as head of government due to his lack of support. Hitler dismisses the idea of negotiating with the Norwegian government, which he views as hostile, and instructs Brouwer to speak directly with King Haakon to make him understand the gravity of the situation. Prince Olav expresses his determination to report for military duty, feeling that he cannot ask others to fight in the war if he is not willing to do the same. Princess Martha is crying, concerned about the sudden decision, reminding Olav that they had discussed this matter previously. Olav insists that the situation has changed since then, and he needs to do everything he can. King Haakon is outside with their grandson when Olav come running to tell him that the Germans were coming, and Martha and the Kynes needs to leave. The king is talking with his son Olav. The king expresses regret for making that decision on Olav's behalf. Olav reassures his father that he never desired anything different, but admits that he doesn't want to be the same kind of king as his father. Kurt enters an empty office and finds a guy called Waldemar Johansson, the office manager. Kurt urgently requests Johansson's help to convey a message to King Haakon. Waldemar, however, expresses skepticism, pointing out that Germany is already bombarding Norway. Kurt insists that he wants to help prevent war and negotiate a solution, claiming he has permission from Hitler to suspend hostilities. He pleads with Johansson to assist him in finding King Haakon to facilitate negotiations. Waldemar tries to make a call. Ambassador Kurt Breuer tells Vidkun Quisling about his planned meeting with King Haakon under the condition that German troop movements cease. However, Quisling informs Brouwer that German troops are advancing and will not stop. Norwegian soldiers are gathered and they heard a car approaching and they took position. Then they opened fire at the cars. Seberg screamed Germans when he saw a soldier approaching. A soldier told King Haakon Germans have passed Hamar. He saw soldiers sleeping on the floor when he gets in the house. Back in the battlefield, Seberg is shot. The Norwegian soldiers are being defeated, so they had to pull away. They left a civilian in Seberg in the hope of German soldiers won't attack civilians. The German soldiers took Seberg and the civilian. Prince Olav is talking to the cabinet enraged because of their decision to send the king to talk with the Germans. He offered to go, but the prime minister told him that the Germans demands the king himself. The cabinet left, and Olav told his father that it could be a trap and they can find a neutral place to discuss with the Germans. The king told him that they should do whatever is possible to negotiate. Kurt told Quisling he will be going to pick the king up, and Quisling asked him where the king is. Kurt told him to keep his men away and went alone. The king went to meet with the Germans. Kurt also arrived at the place and went in. Kurt is welcomed for a meeting with King Haakon. Brouwer requests to converse in German due to his limited Norwegian and states that he has been authorized by Hitler to negotiate directly with the king. Kurt acknowledges the king's authority and respect for Norway, but claims that the country is under German control and that Quisling holds power. He proposes a treaty with Quisling as prime minister, but also also offers an alternative agreement without mentioning Quisling, promising that Quisling will disappear if the king signs immediately. Brouwer admits he is risking his career by going against Hitler's wishes, as Hitler prefers Quisling but values the king more. The king called in the cabinet, saying that he can only decide by discussing it with them. Kurt was against this, saying that it would make things slow, but the king called them in. Koht states that the Norwegian government is ready to negotiate with Germany once the conditions are known. However, Kurt insists that there will be no negotiations without a signature. Koht attempts to continue the discussion in English and asserts that the Norwegian government has the authority to negotiate. Despite this, Kurt decides to leave, stating that he expects a response from the Norwegian cabinet by nightfall, and left. King Haakon expresses to the Norwegian cabinet the heavy responsibility he feels in potentially rejecting the German demands. He states his clear position: he cannot accept these demands as it would violate his duty as king. He emphasizes that he cannot appoint Quisling, and that if the cabinet decides to accept the German demands, he will abdicate for himself and his house. The refusal of King Haakon to accept the German demands led to the bombardment of Elverum and Nybergsund, resulting in 34 deaths in Elverum. As of April 11, 1940, Norway was officially at war with Germany. Kurt, the German envoy, was sent to the Eastern Front and later spent 8 years as a POW in Soviet Russia, dying in 1969. Frederick Seberg was hospitalized for 2 months before joining the Finnish Continuation War and currently resides in Drammen. Crown Princess Martha and her children fled to the USA for the war's duration. On June 7, 1940, the king and crown prince were forced to leave Norway, with the Norwegian military capitulating 3 days later. They collaborated with resistance groups from London. The king's refusal to capitulate became a symbol in the fight for a democratic, free, and independent Norway. Germany surrendered on May 8, 1945, and King Haakon awaited reunion with his family in London before returning to Norway. And with that, the movie ends. We hope you enjoyed our video. Watch the next recaps on the screen and don't forget to subscribe for more amazing recaps. See you in the next one.